Hello, hi everybody, it's Shamika. I'm back, so I'm gonna give everybody a chance to jump in. So when you come online, feel free to go ahead and let us know where you're from. If you have an agency that's already set up, definitely feel free. Definitely feel free to let us know where you're from. Okay, let's see. So I'm gonna. Okay, so when you're coming in, you just want to go to see purchase content. Content if you're having some trouble getting in. So, hi Chandra. So if you want to, feel free to let us know where you're coming in from. And if you have an existing agency, feel free as well to go ahead and drop your agency information, because I'm always more than willing to follow a fellow agency owner and get some information. Hi Chantel, how are you? Hi Nicole. So we're going to give everybody a few minutes to jump on. Definitely let us know where you're from. It's always great to connect and network with other fellow NOSAs here in the group, as well as in other locations, if there are other locations that you want to recruit in. So we're going to give everybody a few minutes to jump on. I think we got one person in the midst of it. And Mississippi. Okay, no agency at this time. Fair Healthcare Staffing. Nicole, are you doing a session on Clubhouse? I feel like I saw a post for you on Clubhouse recently. So if you are, drop that information as well. Chandra, where are you from? Let us know where you're from. So just got one more person that's having some challenges jumping in. So I'm going to give her some time. And correct me if I'm wrong, all you had to do was click on purchase content to get to this place, right? Because of it being my session, I see things a little bit differently. So let me know. Hi, Kay. Kay, let us know where you're from. Kay, did you just message me earlier? Mississippi. Okay, Chandra, you're from Mississippi. So we got quite a few people in here from Mississippi. We got Michigan. And there's just a few more people that are going to jump on. And I'm going to go ahead and get started so that we don't waste any time. As always, the fun thing about these sessions are it really allows you the opportunity to be more in-depth and personal. So you guys can ask any questions that you have. I'll answer them. I'll do a short presentation, and then we'll kind of get really into the questions that you guys have, so that you guys can get those questions answered as you're kind of going along the process. So, all right. And the other thing I wanted to mention too for you all is that you will have access to the video. So upon purchasing this session, you'll also have access afterwards. So if you miss it, or if there's some information that you wanted to jot down or write down, feel free to, okay, Kadisha, okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, great. You can always access the video later. Okay. So, give me 1 second. We got one more person that's kind of struggling to get on. I'll see if I can help her. And then we'll go ahead and get started. Feel free to share your information. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Like I mentioned, you can always check it out later. So, again, I'm Shamika. So most of you guys kind of learned about this from the NOSA group. So I'm the creator of the NOSA group. The NOSA group's been around for about, I want to say we're going into our 3rd year. And what makes that so great is that we started just like you guys. So 3 years ago, we started as travel nurses or nurses in the industry working and looking for some other opportunities to do more in the industry from an entrepreneurial standpoint of view. So one of the reasons that we decided to start our healthcare staffing agency because we wanted the flexibility, that financial freedom. And for those who don't know, I think this year the industry is set to hit $1 billion because of all the COVID stuff and testing and vaccinations around it. So the industry is just growing. You know, when we started, it was a multi-million-dollar industry. Now we're tipping into $1 billion industry. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunity. And what I also tell everybody is there's a lot of room for everyone. Everyone can work and operate in this space. We have a lot of nurses that represent the entire United States, which is great, but it's not a competition thing. So we've definitely worked with people who have also been in the same state that we're in. We've worked with people, you know, who are working for the same agency or company that we're working for. So the main thing I tell people is try to create a niche. So for us, our niche was long-term care. And as we see, long-term care is booming as far as needs are concerned. So that was really a great way for us to get started. And a couple of other things that we did, we really jumped out there. So that was kind of the back end of me creating the group was we jumped out there. We didn't know a lot of stuff. For me personally, I do have a previous background in business. I worked with the federal government and human resources for about 12 years. So I'm a second career nurse. So we were able to kind of bring our strengths into the business and work it out. Now, I created the group because we weren't doing it very well. So I wanted to connect with other people who were maybe in that same place or that same space to kind of help us better maneuver. So over the few years, the group has been doing a great job of doing just that. So like that's the purpose of the group. And that's kind of how we got started. And for us, we got started, we worked the agency. Initially, our first client was a prior company that we worked for, and we used a vendor management system. So everything that I share in the group and everything that I share one-on-one with people aren't just things that I'm thinking about doing or I tried. It's actually things that I've done. So I've done the process of being a travel nurse, being a staff nurse. I've done the process of crisis contracts and things of that nature, as well as rolling into starting my own agency. So first of all, welcome. I'm glad you decided to hang out with me tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and jump into the questions that a lot of people have. And I'll send to you guys at the end of the session of how to get started guide to kind of help you stay on your path. But a lot of people get started for different reasons. I always recommend people to get started with a plan. So you want to have a business plan no matter what business you start. And even though some people have worked around that and been able to get started, in the long run, your plan is what's going to really keep you focused. So a plan should kind of include your marketing and your budgeting and, you know, how you're going to recruit and retain people and what you want your brand to look like, as well as what you want it to represent. And the good thing about it is your first year in business is going to go by so fast that having something to look at to say, hey, this is where I want to be in the industry is important. To say, hey, you know, this is where I want to be in a year. I want to be able to pay myself. You know, that's a reasonable goal. In another year, maybe you'll retire a spouse. Or, you know, you want to start to bring on staff in 9 months. So those goals kind of give you a good roadmap to get started. So I always suggest people to start with your business plan. There's an outline in the group. There's so many templates and resources out there to do a business plan. You don't have to do a full in-depth one, but you want to have one in place just in case you want to go out to get loans or grants and things like that, because people want to know that you're serious and you're not just kind of winging it. And SCORE, Small Business Development Center, SBA are great resources that give you these things for free. They'll give you a template for your business plan. They'll assign you a mentor who will work with you. and kind of help maneuver you things. They'll give you access to information or companies that'll help you with funding. So all of those things really help bring it all together for you when you're getting started. Some other things to consider when getting started is the finances of it all. So it's going to cost money. It'll always cost money. Any business you do will cost money, and don't be surprised by that. In that, for the first few months of your business, if not the first year, you really won't be making any money, and that's okay. But you want to plan for that. So if in the first 6 months you're not generating a large income, what is the plan for the last quarter of that year? What are you going to do differently? So some things people need to remember when they get started is, in addition to having your plan, you want to get your business registered with your state. So everybody's state, sometimes it's your Secretary of State. For a few states, it's your Department of Health. It's who you need to register with to start your healthcare staffing agency. Healthcare staffing agencies or staffing agencies are a little bit different than employment agencies. So you want to make sure that when you're communicating with the person at Secretary of State, that you're making the difference to kind of say, hey, this is the type of agency that I'm doing, so that you get the proper registration so that you can pay taxes. The other thing is you want to get your federal EIN, employee identification number. It's free. Go to irs.gov. And everything that I reference, I'm going to drop in the comments. From there, because you'll need your state registration information to get your federal EIN. And then from there, you're going to need insurance. So with any business and with the level of liability that our particular industry is under, you want to have insurance. You want to have general and professional liability insurance along with workers' comp. So there's a lot of question, I wouldn't say controversy, but there's a lot of question around the W-2 versus the 1099. And I tell people, in my experience and the experience of other NOSAs and other people that I've worked with, it's very, very challenging to classify nurses, CNAs, med techs, CMAs, those types of roles as 1099. So it's a bigger picture to the whole 1099 versus W-2 than just the no tax fees. It's actually a job classification with the Department of Labor and the IRS that kind of wraps it all together. So I encourage people, if it's something you're kind of on the fence with, do your research, talk to a tax professional, because if you do it wrong, the IRS will send you a letter about it, so that you know what you're doing, what you should be doing, and what you shouldn't be doing when it comes to the business. And once you do that, for certain states, it's just a few, they may ask for additional things. For instance, the state of Maryland also asks that you submit a policies and procedures, which you should already have in place when you're kind of working through your business plan. Some states require that you register as a nurse staffing agency. Florida requires that you register with ACHA, ACHA. California also has another additional process that you need to complete, but you can check with the state, and a lot of people on the NOSA group page have identified those things, and some of those things change year for year. So I would just make sure that you connect with the right person and explain to them specifically what type of business you're looking to open up. And then the last thing, for the insurances, it has been challenging for a lot of NOSAs to obtain insurance just because of the level of risk with COVID-19 to staff, but you can get it. So I tell people some things to keep in mind when you're in the process of getting insurances is to give estimates. So when they ask for your payroll, you want to provide them an estimated payroll, example for your workers' comp. So it's not unrealistic for a new agency owner to only have 10 employees. And from that number, you can estimate what the payroll would be if you say they're working 40 hours or 30 hours or average number of hours, or 6 to 10. I think on average, new NOSAs are moving about 6 to 10 employees within their first 9 months. And then from there, you want to consider your number of employees, your payroll costs, and provide estimates. A lot of people have either been declined or delayed in getting their insurance for those reasons, either because they estimated too high, too low, or just didn't have enough information for the adjuster, the insurance agent, to create a claim for them. And then for your professional and general liability, the standard starting coverage is 1/3. That's what most agencies refer to it as, and it's 1 million, 3 million aggregate. And as I mentioned before, so I'm not a tax professional, I'm not a insurance professional, and a lot of these are just my experiences. And some of the things you want to make sure that your professional and general liability insurance covers beyond the business, because that's the initial coverage, is you want it to cover any errors. You want it to cover any, most of them have a standard package. So you wanted to cover any sort of, I believe they're called errors, or medical errors is what they refer to it as. Any issues related to the business while your employees on site doing business for your organization. But it doesn't have to necessarily cover an automobile. So when some NOSAs have been speaking with insurance companies, a lot of times the insurance company agents confuse a home care versus a staffing agency. So it's important that you clarify. So for home care agencies, you do need to have the insurance coverage. And a lot of times that can be the reason why your premiums are so high. So on average, a premium can range from $3,000 to $5,000 for a year. Your premiums for your workers' comp has been about 5 to 7, and a lot of that is very dependent upon the state that you're in. And for every state, there is an opportunity to get a more manageable workers' comp plan through your state fund, and it's called just that, your state fund, that specifically work with smaller businesses to help them get started and get the appropriate coverage. Some other questions that people have are related to profit margins, as well as the difference between getting started and launching. So I'm going to go back to profit margins in a second. So the difference between getting started and launching is this. To me, getting started means that you registered your business with the state, you have a business name, you probably have a, what state are you in, Cheryl? I can send you some information about the state fund. So the difference between launching and getting started is you started the business, you registered everything, you might even have a business plan, you've gotten your EIN number, you maybe have gotten your insurance. I'll send you a link, Cheryl, for the state fund. You have everything in place, but you have no clients. So that to me is getting started. And a lot of people get stuck in that place. And for me, launching is you've done all these things, you have clients, and you're actually placing employees in positions, whether it's temporary, permanent, per diem. That's launching to me. So I've worked with a lot of NOSAs who have launched, and I encourage people, if you're working with anybody, that you make sure that you're clear as far as what their background is, with regards to assisting people with getting started versus launching. So it will touch a little bit on some of the reasons why people kind of get stuck in that place. So profit margin. So the industry profit margin is 25% to 30% profit margin. And essentially that would be your bill rate minus your pay rate minus any expenses that the business has. So it's ultimately what you bring home. And that can vary. So some people use a percentage as a profit margin for them to kind of stick within. Some people use an actual fixed number. And what I tell people is whatever you choose to do based on your business, just because everybody's structured differently, just be consistent with it so that you don't kind of get hit on the back end, whether it's with taxes or additional expenses. Just make sure that you're kind of keeping track of what that looks like for you and your agency. Some other things to consider are creating a niche. So when you're getting started, you want to have something that sets you apart. So in the NOSA group today, there are 2,300 members, and we are all over the United States, which I'm super excited about. But not all of us are working in the same lane. There are NOSAs who exclusively work in hospitals. There are NOSAs who work in long-term care, LTAC hospitals. Some do peds, some do labor and delivery, some do federal contracts, some do state, some do, some non-traditional nursing roles, especially with COVID. Some do COVID testing. So there's so much room out there. But in getting into the industry, you want to make sure that you're kind of finding your lane so that you're not everywhere. So I'm always a big advocate of do what you're good at, stay in your lane. There's a lot of things I can do, but I definitely try to stay in the lane that I'm good at. And I encourage you, especially early on, to do the same. There'll be a lot of opportunities once you kind of get rolling to do a couple of different things, but kind of staying in your lane, especially that first year, will allow you to really perfect and improve what it is that you're trying to do, so that as you move into year 2, 3, and 5, you're not still kind of trying to figure out what your agency is about. When people think of your brand or hear about your agency, what's the first thing that come to mind? Is it, oh, well, they staff everywhere, or they staff this area, or they do a little bit of this and that. So you just want to make sure that through being focused in one area or being in a niche, and it doesn't have to be as singly focused as just like long-term care. Like some NOSAs are niche to CNAs. That's a niche. Some do cardiac or ED. So those are all niches, but you can broaden your horizon in that one niche a lot easier than if, for instance, with us, a long-term care agency wants to jump into doing emergency nursing. And not to say that we can't, but a better fit would be that same long-term care agency jumping into, instead of just staffing nurses, now we're staffing physical therapists and physical therapist aides and occupational therapists in the long-term care setting. So, that's something to consider, just because once you get going, a lot of opportunity can knock at many times. And when you open the door to take every opportunity, sometimes your brand gets a little bit confused and you kind of find your hand in multiple pots. A couple of other things I want to mention, and then I'm going to let you guys jump into questions, is how to plan, how to budget to open. What are some of the common mistakes people make? So how to plan to open. So I already touched a little bit on, having a business plan or a business outline, and some of the places you can get it. You want to market your agency, which I touched a little bit on in the session last week, and I'll talk more about it here. But more than that, you want to have the funding in place. And for us, we self-funded, which is an option, but there are so many options out there for you to get funding. And I tell people, before you go to do a factoring funding company, please make sure that you've exhausted the other resources that are available to you through small business development or SBA loans, angel investors. Now there's even more grants for small businesses because of COVID. Really exhaust those things, apply to those grants. There was one I just put up today from Comcast. I believe that particular grant is $10,000. Go in those directions first, so that you can maintain the money that you bring in, so that you can appreciate and have the profit from the hard work that you're doing. I'm not saying that funding isn't an option, because it is an option, but it's just a tool. So to me, we didn't fund or do payroll funding or factoring, which is essentially a company that kind of comes in and fronts money for you and then charges you a fee for it once the invoice is paid. So, and some of that is set up in different kinds of ways, but I encourage people to do your research on them because they look so different. They're not all great. They're not all made the same. They don't all provide the same service. And funding is different than a back office. And on Sunday, if you guys are available, Amanda with Plax Capital is really going to get into a lot of that stuff, and her session is really going to be good. because I think it'll help people who are kind of in the space of getting started, so that you'll make a lot more better financial decisions. And if you're kind of in a space where you feel like, hey, I don't know where to go with this, or I don't know where to start with this, ask for help. You know, SBA has a lot of programs, SCORE has a lot of programs where they can connect you with financial advisors. Those are the best people to help you manage your money, get that information on track, so that when you're at a space to say, hey, I want to apply for this business loan or what have you, you'll have the things in place. You'll have the financials, you'll have the receivables, you'll have the income statements, and it's not something that you really have to pull together. So that's a big thing. And if you're looking to self-fund or kind of get an idea of how much you would need to fund, I always tell people have 3 months of payroll. Unfortunately, even though it would be ideal, not everybody pays on time. Even in business, even big facilities, everybody doesn't pay on time. So you want to cover yourself as much as possible. 3 months is usually a great place to start, if not more, to allow you some buffer. And until you kind of get into a routine of getting consistent invoices paid, I would keep your number of employees to a minimum, just so that you're not kind of stuck in a place where, you know, you're kind of forced to look at a funding company or other options because financially things aren't going in the best direction. So, and I do want to touch on another question I saw in the group that you guys might have as well, was regards to when do you pay yourself? So that's a personal decision. I don't tell people how to do that. And a lot of that depends on what direction you want the company to go in. So because we self-funded, all the money went back into the agency that first year, and it just kind of worked out a little bit better that way, but that might not be feasible for everybody. As well as for us, we also work the agency, which is something that you really need to consider, especially now because you have such high bill rates. We've seen as high as $70 for some CNA positions, and not to say you guys are working as CNAs, but we've seen very high bill rates, and it's worth to me going, if I can go and I'm available to work that, to bring money back into the agency initially. And just like with anything else with the whole working for your agency, we're healthcare professionals. We can do it. We can do it at night. We can do it at day. We can do it on weekends. You know, I find working for my own agency more beneficial to me, and it allows me to do what I'm going to touch on now, is to network. When any of us, you guys included, go into a facility or a hospital or clinic or any healthcare setting, and you're new, and maybe you're there temporarily, the very first thing most people ask you at some point during the day that you're there is, well, what agency are you from? And I said, that's your door, that's your open to sell your agency. And you don't have to sell it in a way of saying, well, I'm the owner of the agency. No. If you have a partner, that could be the person they contact. If you have a family or friend that's handling the phones for you, that could be the person that they contact. But you're there with the people are watching you, you're doing a great job. That kind of turns that light on to people like, oh, I'm interested in knowing more about that agency. Can you give me that information? Or who do I need to contact? Or what types of jobs do you guys recruit for? Or do you do travelers? Or do you do local? Do you do per diem? So that becomes a great selling point that I tell people I use when I do work for the agency, as well as you want to make sure that you're out in your community. You know, making that community connection is really key, because it really allows you to market your agency, because you never know. I've had nurses get contracts at church, through friends, through family members. So there's so many resources of people, because you may not know somebody who knows somebody. But if you keep it to yourself that you're an agency owner, a lot of times those great opportunities can go missed. And a couple of other things when it comes to getting your first contract in 30 days is social media. I tell people time and time again, if you're not on there, and for you guys who are just starting out, go ahead and set up your Facebook business page. It's better to do it now and put content out there and let people know that you're coming soon than to have nothing there, and then once you're launched and you have clients, to start the process of recruiting. The time is now. Social media is where at least 90% of healthcare professionals hang out. Now more than ever, especially for the ones who are working those longer hours and longer days. So if that's where they are, then that's where you need to be. It looks like Facebook groups and LinkedIn. It looks like TikTok and Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all of these platforms. But the three that I would say the most give you the most bang for your buck would definitely be Facebook. So a Facebook business page, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So a lot of nurses have been able to get clients via LinkedIn. So I definitely connect with those things. So I got a few more questions that I have to answer for you guys about getting started. And then I'm going to let you guys ask me some questions. And then we're going to keep moving. So some other factors to consider. So this time is such a great time to get started with your staffing agency, is because this is other factors to consider. Like, who would know that we would be in a pandemic, not only for like almost a year now, but it's kind of it has such a residual or ripple effect. So it's not just like, oh, it's a pandemic, it's affecting the world, but then it started in New York, now it's in Florida, then it's in Texas, then it's in California, and it's just kind of creating a constant ripple effect, whether it's testing, vaccine, ICU beds getting low, and all those things involved. So that's what, to me, other things to consider means. So you want to make sure that if you haven't put together an emergency preparedness plan within your business plan, do so. Because if you're sending nurses out, whether it's the nurses that are struggling to move about in Texas, or, you know, nurses in California who are dealing with shortages when it comes to beds, you want to have a plan in place to kind of manage that, because this isn't by any stretch of the imagination the type of environment that we walked into for healthcare staffing. I think it's a very intriguing disruption to the industry. The rates are all over the place. The bill rates are all over the place. Nurses who have never traveled are traveling now. A lot of them are leaving their staff jobs to travel. So there's a lot of variables going on, and it's important to kind of find your space in that. And what I tell a lot of agency owners just starting out too is, as many of the nurses who have never traveled who are traveling now, I know quite a few, there are nurses who aren't traveling. So you just want to be able to tap into that population if you're looking to staff locally, and make sure that you're able to meet their needs. And when I say meet their needs, every nurse, CNA, everybody wants more money. So I wouldn't give them what you would have given them in 2019 as pay. That's not going to work. So Nicole, emergency preparedness plan would be more of a plan specifically around weather events or like the pandemic. So what does your agency have in place when it comes to COVID testing, or if a person tests positive for COVID? Are you giving guarantee pay? For instance, the nurses in Texas, some of the nurses in Texas are having a hard time. You know, what would you do if there was a weather event in the state that you're in? It could be a hurricane, it could be a flood, it could be fires in California. But the one thing we know is the healthcare staffing industry is not going to stop moving. They're going to still need staff. And for most of them, they're going to want to make sure that people actually show up to their shifts. What do you have in place to make that happen? As well as, what do you have in place to communicate with your staff in more than one avenue about what's happening? Some companies have made the decision to pay their people 24 hours a day. You know, some hospitals have had their employees staying in the hospital and unable to return home. For agency, that might look a little bit different, but if you have a group of agency employees who are willing to work 4 or 5 days during something similar to what Texas is experiencing, you know, can you house them closer to their hospital? Can you transport them to the hospital? You know, those are all things that you want to consider and put in place in your emergency preparedness plan. And you want to make it specific to your state. So like, for instance, for Texas, you would need to do something related to snow and weather. More so, California, you may want to do something related to fires and earthquakes. Florida and that whole panhandle, hurricanes. So something along those lines, but more of an agency perspective of how you're going to communicate, how you're going to handle staffing, and then any other issues related around getting your employees to work or if they can't work. So my last few things is some frequently asked questions. So I'm just going to hit like 5 of the frequently asked questions, and then I'm going to let you guys share any that you have. So from frequently asked questions are, can you make money in healthcare staffing? Yes. A lot of people make money. Most people, if you do it well, can make 6 figures fairly well. It's a lot of work. How much time do you spend like recruiting and doing those things and marketing? You spend a lot of time. So honestly, as a business owner, and when you own any business, because you enjoy it, you're going to spend time doing it more. But in healthcare staffing, you're actually spending time even more than you do at the job, because it's a 24-hour business. So our first year, we were working 16-hour days almost every day, because we had to manage call-outs, we had to manage issues at facilities. You want to make sure that you have a process in place for if you have an incident with a staff member at a facility. How do you recruit employees? There's so many platforms that you can use to recruit employees, but I tell people, when you're genuine with people and kind of honest about what it is that you're trying to do, that definitely encourages people to connect with your agency, but convenience. So healthcare industry as a whole, to me, isn't as computer savvy as it could be or technology savvy as it could be, but it's getting there. And I encourage you to make your agency as technically savvy as possible. Most nurses, especially travelers, because there's kind of a 2-piece fold for the healthcare industry. So most travelers are attracted to convenience. They're attracted to money, and they're attracted to places that they want to go. So the big thing is convenience, and that's why technology is so important. So if you can do your application online on your phone, you're heading in the right direction. But if you're doing things through a paper process, those might be some of the hurdles that you have. Another question is, what are some of the common mistakes that nurses who are starting out new make? Some of the common mistakes are just that: not considering the impact of technology, not considering the impact of social media. So I'm on all social media platforms. I'm even on TikTok. And the reach on those platforms is huge. And the great thing about it is it's free. Facebook groups is free. Instagram is free. Twitter, free. YouTube, free. All those platforms are free. You really just need to maybe get some support and guidance on how to post, which is something that I did because I took a course on it. And just do it. Just make it as a priority in your life, whether it's, hey, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to post. I'm going to take my lunch break and post, because that creates a following over time, and then people are interested in what it is that you're doing. Some other common mistakes is not figuring out the finances of it all. So a lot of people are surprised about some of the premiums and fees that are involved, especially with insurance and taxes. When you own your business, you're going to have to pay taxes to the state. In any state that you work in, any state that you staff, you'll have to pay taxes. You also have to pay your insurance premium. Some companies are great at offering quarterly or monthly rates for the premium. Some of them will offer yearly rates as well. You might get a discount after a year. So I tell people, once you do your first year, you kind of establish your business from an insurance standpoint of view in the same way you do when you're working with car insurance. And then your next year going into business, you'll be able to, one, reach out to more companies to get better rates. If not, also getting a company that you have the initial premium with to lower the rates. Some other mistakes, and I'm going to just do two, and I'll let you guys drop the questions, is growing too fast. Some people have grown faster than they're able to move, or that their infrastructure is set up. Hey, Dale. So when you grow too fast, then you miss things, or things get missed. So a great example to me of growing too fast would be you've gotten multiple contracts. You maybe even joined a vendor management system. But what happens when the application process for your applicants is cumbersome? And now you're in a place where you're staffing in multiple states and you have access to a vendor management system, which is a larger client, but you can't keep up with it because you hadn't paid attention or given some attention to your processes and the level of efficiency of them. So if it takes more than a couple of days for an applicant to submit documents or get documents to you, that's too long. You need to relook at the process. If your application process is solely on paper, or if you're asking people to come into the office, that's just not going to work. You need to look at other options, whether it's DocuSign, HelloSign, the Kamana platform. You need to make it as efficient as possible. And the other reason that that's important is because nurses now have become accustomed to that, especially those who travel. So those who travel have come accustomed to, you get on your telephone, you see a job, you apply to the job, you send your documents, and you get an offer letter all in a week's time. So that level of efficiency is so key. The same thing applies to not looking at proper resources to work your business. And that plays in with scheduling. If you're still doing a scheduling process where you're sending people text messages back and forth, that's not going to work. You need to look at apps, tools, resources, create something. You have to do something that makes sense. And the more features that your app has, or whatever scheduling tool that you use has, the better. There are companies out there that are doing on-demand staffing, where I can go to my phone, this phone, I can look at it, tap on the app, see a shift, accept the shift, know how much the shift is paying, and get paid after I work the shift. So that's where we're moving towards, and that's why innovation in the industry is so important. And it's also important as staffing agency owners to kind of be in the loop of all of that. So I've been talking for some time, guys, so I'm going to let you guys start dropping me some questions, because I want to know what you guys want to get answered, so I can answer some questions for you guys about getting started. Or if you have other questions, we're a smaller group, which is exciting for me because it gives me a little bit more time to hang out with you guys and help you all along the way. So feel free to drop your questions about anything that I've covered so far, as well as if you have any other questions about the process of getting started. So I'm going to let you guys. Okay, great. Okay, so Cheryl, what is the best way or platform to conduct interviews? So that's a good question. So it's a little tricky. So I'll tell you this. So two things. So with the interviews, I'm going to tell you, in these times, get creative with it. So we at our agency, and I'm working on doing something here in the NOSA group, did a virtual job fair where we did like 15-minute phone interviews with people on the phone with one of the recruiters. And that worked out really well. And that created a environment where you can just kind of yes, no people. Yes, it works. No, it doesn't. Which is good for a time standpoint of view. But there was a lot of logistics involved. So that's what a lot of companies are doing, is like this virtual job fair thing. But it's something that you can do. But as far as platforms, I probably would not suggest a phone call. But there are other platforms, and Indeed has one of them. And then there's other similar things off of Indeed where you can have people respond to recorded questions. I'm not sure if it's on Zoom, but I can find out. But essentially what it is they'll kind of go through that initial application process, which they can do with Facebook, and then they'll be prompted to answer questions. For example, so I've gone through it, and it might say, okay, well, this is the I'm not sure what they call it. This is next step in the screening process. And they're like personality questions and job specific questions. And they kind of let you identify them yourself. And it might say, hey, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult situation. We've heard that question 100 times. Or what makes you feel like you will be a good fit for this organization? So those are great. And those are time savers, because for us, when Indeed first rolled it out, people who didn't answer it, that shows your level of interest. So we didn't have to make the phone call. But if somebody answered it and were intentional about their responses, that's the person we want to talk to. So that was a great pre-screening process for conducting interviews. Zooms are always good. You don't have to show your face. It's nice to do that, though. But I would do Zoom interviews or Google Meet interviews. I've participated in a few myself. I think that allows people to put a face to a name. So that's always good. So I hope that answers that question about interviews. But definitely, Cheryl, be creative about it. I wouldn't take your traditional phone call, because one, for a lot of healthcare professionals, they're hard to get in touch with, even when they commit to a time. But I think being more creative will allow you to get a wider reach. Chantel, can you start your staffing agency from home, or do you need to have an office location? So there are some states that do require a commercial space. From my last check, the only state that I knew about that did was Mississippi. I don't know if that's changed, so it's been a couple of years since I've looked into it. So it's just a few, I want to say maybe 3 states that require that commercial space. But for the rest of us, myself included, I work at home. I've worked at home from the beginning. Nicole, I launched March 3rd. Should I get contracts first or hire employees? Okay, that's a good question, Nicole. So this is my take on it. So I tell people, get the contracts. And the reason I tell people to get the contracts first is because the people will come. But the contracts and the process of obtaining the contracts can take weeks. On average, I think it takes probably 3 to 6 weeks for a NOSA to get a contract. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of NOSAs that get contracts in less time. But if you're putting your efforts toward getting a contract, then once you have it and you've already kind of, gone out there and gotten your Facebook business page and social media going, once you have it, all you have to do is plug the people in. So I always have been an advocate of getting the contracts first. And also the other caveat to getting the contracts first is if you get the people, I don't know any nurses that are going to wait for you to get the contract. So that's the other piece of when I tell people get the contract first, because there's contracts. So there are some contracts that are business opportunities that aren't like your best top tier contracts. And then they're just a segue. So like, for instance, if we got a contract with a facility that had a super low bill rate, but that facility has sister facilities, I tell people that's worth considering. Because not every contract is something that you have to work. You want to staff it, but you don't have to staff 100% every contract. You want to allow it to kind of create a portfolio for you where you have a couple of different types of contracts versus dumping all your good staff into that one contract. And if something goes wrong, then you're out of staff and you're out of a contract. So I encourage people to diversify their contracts, but I would say get the contract first. So Kay, for healthcare, do you have a certain software that you use to create, or did you build that? And then got a system? What certain software are you talking about? Okay, like what type of software? So there's no, like, the hiring process for healthcare staffing is very similar to other industries. Some of the biggest difference is that it's a 24-hour business. So you're really staffing for 24 hours types of shifts, whether it's 12s or 8s or 16s. But you can really use any type of system. But there are a lot of systems that are tailored well, there's just a few. There's only a few systems that are tailored to healthcare staffing, but people typically use, whatever makes sense. Dale, I'm in the process of applying for a state fund, workers' comp. It's been difficult getting a quote from other companies. Can you just share some info if you covered it? I can rewatch. Okay. So for the workers' comp, so the process of getting insurance, period, Dell, is going to be a little bit more challenging because of COVID. I've worked with the state fund in Delaware because I know you're in Delaware, and the process can be long. And that's just, I don't know if it's because it's a state or it's a state fund. It can be challenging in general. One of the things I was speaking about earlier is to have a reasonable payroll, because that's some of the things that they'll ask for when it comes to your workers' comp, and a reasonable number of employees. And if you're not going to obtain contracts but want to obtain contracts in the future in hospitals, do not put that you're staffing in hospitals, because that'll impact the rate and that'll impact how much the rate is. And the reason is, and this is just a suggestion, is because hospitals are high risk in a way that long-term care facilities are not, or LTAC hospitals are not. So if a workers' comp company looks at you and you're showing you're staffing in hospitals, that's showing that you're at the higher risk level. And that's going to increase your rate, and that's also going to make it more likely that you get denied or declined for coverage. So if you, in your first year or first 6 months, do not have a contract or cannot get a contract or don't plan to get a contract in a hospital, don't put that down as the coverage type that you're looking for. And I'll connect you, Dell. I'll connect you with Natalie, who did a presentation, but unfortunately she had to take it down, and she has way more insight into all of that. Nicole, do you like travel or per diem? I'm going to say I probably would say that I like travel, because you can put them into longer contracts. And what we did was, when we started out, we did do per diem initially, and then converted our people into local or travel contracts so that we wouldn't have to manage that day-to-day per diem. Because honestly, and everybody should do it, but doing daily per diem shifts is extremely time consuming, whether you're doing it yourself or you're doing it with a scheduler. So we would have employees come in, if they like the facility liked them. Within the first month or so, we would either work with the facility, work with the employee and the facility to convert them into a contract. And then that way they had a set schedule. And travelers can be challenging because travelers have to manage housing, whether it's something that you pay for or not. Sometimes travelers travel to places they've never been, so there could be some life adjustments there. There could be some weather issues, some transportation issues. So if you jump into that travel world, I definitely would advise you to do a lot of research on it. Okay, so Kay, you said PC Recruiters, Surly, Big Builder, I think they are called. So I'm not sure what you mean, Kay, exactly, but most of the recruiting was done in-house, so we didn't actually pay anybody or have anybody on our team do any of the recruiting initially. I will say a lot of opportunities to recruit are in your job boards, and if you're not in the job boards, you need to get on the Facebook job boards. There's so many of them out there. There's Gypsy, there's Traveler, there's Premium. They're specific to specialties. They can be specific to CNAs, LPNs, RNs, long-term care, LTAC. It could be regionally specific. It could be Southwest, Northeast. So there's at least, I want to say, over 2,000 Facebook groups that's geared specifically towards healthcare professionals. And that gives you also a lot of insight as to what other agencies are offering. So, all right. You guys got any other questions? I'm here. I'm here to hang out with you guys, answer your questions. And I wanted to tell everybody too, in the beginning, I didn't get a chance to mention. So you'll have access to this video whenever. I will share it because I'm also going to share a getting started guide with you guys. So thank you guys for hanging out with me today. So if you want to go back, like you were saying, Dale, you jumped in a little bit late, you can definitely go back. You'll always have access to it. And I'll share it in the message I'll send out to you guys tomorrow or Friday. I'll try to send it out before the end of the week so that you can have it and look back on it. If you have notes or you have other additional questions, feel free to reach out. And as always, if you have questions along the way on the journey, in the group, there's so much information. And there's a how to get started video on there as well that kind of gives you a lot of insight. Yes, Kay, you can ask a question via inbox. That's fine. And there's a lot of information. And I want to tell people everybody's experience is different. So we got started differently than other people. We definitely jumped in there. We didn't have a mentor. We didn't have any resources that others had. So that process is really, when other people share their experiences about getting started, that process is really person specific. Beyond the steps of registering with your state, Secretary of State, to register your business, or the EIN, the federal EIN number, getting your insurance. That process looks a little bit similar. For those who are launching this year, the insurance piece looks a little bit more challenging, but all those other steps along the way really is person specific. So, and one of the things that I encourage you guys to really, really do, especially in the early stages, is do your research and ask questions. Whether you're asking questions of me or other members, ask questions and ask some more questions. And make sure that you're getting the information from someone who's a appropriate resource. Somebody who can actually say to you, hey, this is what I did, and you can reference it here. Because there's quite a bit of misinformation out there. So yes, I'm available if you want to inbox if you have any questions, no problem. Sure, I think I may need a blueprint for the hiring process. No problem. Does this exist? I think I could probably work on something. We'll see. What about the previous video? So this video, Dale, is available to you. And if you attended the previous session last Wednesday, I messaged it to everybody, but I can send it to you as well. I missed most of the last video. So Dale and Cheryl, if you guys were in the last session, I'll send you guys a message through Messenger with that video for that group. So each session in the 8-week series is separate. So the people that attend this may not attend the other one. So when I send out the message, it just goes to the people who attended. Is there a cold call script, or did you not do them for contracts? So there is a cold call script. We didn't really do it, but essentially one of the things with the cold call script that's important is personalizing it. So, Kay, when you message me, I can send you, it's just a little blurb of what we use and allow you to personalize it. So that's fine. I can send it to you. Any more questions? And like I mentioned before, we'll be running the series for the next, I think we're about 6 weeks in because we started last week. So we're about 6 weeks in on different topics. Of course, I chose some of the most popular topics in the group so that you guys can do what we're doing here, is just kind of get more in depth, get more questions, you know, kind of personalize the conversation so that you can kind of be put in the right direction. Okay, so I add the script to the message for you guys. So, and mind you, it's just a blurb. But there's a pretty cool post that LaQuana did in the group that she kind of shared her experience. So I'll tag you guys in there too. Yeah, I'll add it. So I'll send out to you guys before the end of the week. I'll send you the Getting Started Guide, this video, but you'll still have access to the video as well. And then also the little message, the little script that we used for contracts, and you guys can personalize it as you feel you need to. So, okay. Okay, so if you guys don't have anything else for me, okay, do I need to be a part of the Career Unlimited VSP to attend the training? Dale, no, I don't think. We can talk offline about that. No, I don't think you need to attend that. So if you guys don't have any other questions, thank you guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope the information was resourceful. I hope you got some of your questions answered. I hope this gave you just a little bit of a push in starting your agency and getting started and getting going. As always, you know, that process of getting started isn't really hard, but the bigger piece is definitely launching. So if you're kind of way past the I'm already ready to get started space, Shamika, and you're ready to launch, this is a great video to kind of review again, to kind of sit down and hit those pointers where you might be having some challenges. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to reach out. All right, thanks again, and you guys have a good evening. Good night.